All right, and we're live. So welcome to the PowerShell Virtual User Group. This is Joel Bennett, and my guest this month is Carl Webster. I will let him pretty much take it away.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Joel. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for Jeff Wouters for linking us up.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Let me go ahead and get this
slides
going and get the screen share going here. All right. You got it?
I do. Yep.
All right. Well, I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects tonight is my documentation scripts. And for those that don't know me, I'm an independent consultant, fiercely independent consultant. I'm based out of the Nashville, Tennessee area, as you can tell by my accent. I'm a Citrix technology professional. I've been since 2010, and I just found out about a month ago that I am the world's oldest CTB. So I am affectionately known as Granddad in the Citrix world. And there's some information, my website. I make it very difficult to find me on the internet. Website's carlwebster.com, emails webster@carlwebster.com, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, everything is just Carl Webster. So I'm very anonymous on the internet. So hook up with me, follow me on Twitter, link up on LinkedIn. Our little agenda, I'm going to give you an overview of the state of all the scripts that I have out there, and then the two newest scripts, and then I'll cover some of the challenges I have come across doing these scripts. Now the current scripts, one of the newest ones, these are in alphabetical order. We have one now for Active Directory, and I keep saying we because these scripts are a huge community effort. I have testers from all over the world. I have people like Jeff Wouters from the Netherlands. I have Ian Brighton from the UK, Michael B. Smith, from here in the States, and then other people from around the world who have contributed code and done testing and stuff. So it's a huge community effort, all of these scripts are. The next new one is DHCP. Then Barry Schiffer from the Netherlands created one for the Citrix Netscaler using the Word stuff that I use in all my other scripts. And his script is actually housed on carlwebster.com so that we just have a central collection point for all the Citrix related documentation scripts. Then I've got one for Zen Desktop for the personal vDisks. This is the only one that doesn't do Word. This one does Excel. Then we have provisioning services, Zen 5. And now just recently, within the last couple of weeks, the Zen 5 I've had to split out into two separate scripts. There's Zen 5 for Windows Server 2003 and Zen 5 for Windows Server 2008. And the reason for that is I am currently working on, matter of fact, just started today on version 4.2 of all the Zen scripts, and Ian Brighton and Jeff Wouters are working on some optimization stuff for all of the Word stuff. It works best if you're running PowerShell 3 or higher, and obviously Windows Server 2003 does not support PowerShell version 3.
Oh, right.
So I have had to fork those into two separate scripts, and the version I started work on today, version 4.2, will be the last script that I will do for Zen 5 for Server 2008, mainly because Zen 5 for Server 2003 has reached end of life. So Citrix is not doing anything else with that product. Then I also have script for Zen 6 and Zen 6.5. And then one of the first scripts I did, Zen Desktop 4. This script's not been updated in over 2 years, but it's still being downloaded. A lot of people still using this old Zen Desktop product from Citrix. Now, originally, I never intended to release any of my scripts because I had been on Stack Overflow and all these different PowerShell forums and code sharing sites, and I have seen what people do to other people's PowerShell stuff. And until yesterday, I had never, in the 3 years these scripts have been out there, I've never received a negative comment about the scripts until yesterday. But
you see what happens? You get involved with developers.
Yeah, yep, that's right. You dev types, I tell you what. Now, one thing I should have mentioned up front is I am not a developer. I'm not a programmer. I don't think like a developer, and I obviously don't code like a developer. I am just a Citrix admin, engineer, architect who has seen customer issues centered around documentation. A lot of people, like developers, don't realize the need for documentation. Customers do. Management does. Managers won't documentation. And what I found, there wasn't anything out there. So that's why I started back in April 2011 doing this, and I was not going to release my scripts. Then in around late September 2011, Jari and Gibson convinced me to release my scripts out to the community, and I did. And it's the acceptance for these scripts and the feedback, the positive feedback I have received from the various communities that has been extremely positive.
Good.
The DACP script, it's only 5 days old. It was released at 6 a.m. Eastern Time Saturday morning. And so it's already had 700 downloads. The Active Directory script also was just released this past Saturday when I was speaking at the Experts to Experts conference in Brussels, Belgium. It's already had 900 downloads in 5 days. The PVD, 1800, Netscaler, Barry just released this literally a month ago. I believe it was May 5th during a presentation I was doing at Citrix Synergy Conference in Los Angeles. So for a month old, that script's already had 2,200 downloads. There's been such a pent-up demand for the Netscaler script that once Barry and Ian add in, there's some functionality in Netscaler called Access Gateway. Once that is added, I believe that script will be the most popular script on my site. Next is XenDesktop 4 for 3,400, XenApp 5, 13,000, PVS, 14,000, XenApp 6, 19,000, and then the one that just blows me away, my XenApp 6.5 script has been downloaded over 75,000 times. Wow. So all of these scripts together have been downloaded over 130,000 times. So yesterday, I had an individual ask me, who in their right mind would want a documentation script that outputted into Word? I think 130,000 downloads for these documentation scripts speaks for itself.
The answer is anybody who has a manager that wants stuff documented.
Yes, that is correct. So I have 2 scripts in development. That gives us 10 documentation scripts so far. I've got 2 more. I have XenDesktop 5 and XenDesktop 7. They're completely different products. Now, the thing with XenDesktop 5, I have been working on that script for 13 months. Well, actually, this month makes 14 months I've been working on the script. XenDesktop 7, June makes the 9th month I have been working on this script. The the Active Directory and the DACP scripts, I got both of those done in a month. The PowerShell is so convoluted. I can't.
Is that because are you using commands that they provide, or are you?
Yes. Yes, they have a PowerShell SDK, and I'm using their stuff. And let's just say Jeffrey Snover would kick someone's butt at Citrix for the level of PowerShell because it's not very well done.
Right.
Matter of fact, the PVS one, last year in my conference presentations, I called the PVS a pathetic piece of crap PowerShell because it does nothing with objects. It just outputs text.
Oh, no, really?
And so I had to write a function to actually loop through all the text that they provide in order to get the properties and values.
So basically, they wrote PowerShell commandlets, but it's just like calling native apps, and you.
It's a wrapper for their MCLI commandlet. It's just like I believe there were some MVPs, PowerShell MVPs that wrote some wrappers around NetSH for DHCP.
Right, but I bet you they turned the output into objects.
Yes, yeah. Citrix didn't. Citrix needs to be schooled on how to do proper PowerShell. So these two right here, I've actually now been assigned. Well, I went on so many rants last year, tearing Citrix a new one on how bad their PowerShell stuff is, that last summer Citrix actually gave me a very high-level person to work with. So if I feel that I've run into any roadblocks or people not helping me, that I can contact this individual. I've only had to do that once, and it's like the nuclear bomb option. Yeah, when I emailed that person, I got results within 15 minutes. So I almost used that about a month ago at Citrix Synergy, but they hooked me up with a new engineer. I believe he's either in Ireland or UK, who's also a dev type guy. And there's some information I was needing on administrators within Zen Desktop for the various types of functionality you can have within Zen Desktop. He had access to the code and the developers, and it took him 3 weeks to figure it out.
Wow.
Yeah. So me being a non-dev, wasn't going to happen. So my goal is to try and get these two scripts finished by Forum Boston, which I believe starts July 21st. So I've got about 6 weeks to get those two scripts done, so I'm hoping I'll be able to.
And you said earlier you're an independent.
Fiercely independent consultant, yes.
Do you do these in your free time, or are you doing them as part of your consulting?
Some of these I have done because customers needed a way to document their environment, and they didn't have, and there was nothing out there. And so I have offered to do the scripts. And so what I do is I do basic scripts to get them what they need. And then in my hotel room at night or on the weekends or whatever, then I'll take the scripts and then, really make them to where I feel they can be released to the community, greatly enhance them, add parameters. Usually when I'm doing this stuff for customers, everything's hard-coded. I know farm names and server names and all that stuff. And so once the customer has what they have paid for, then I'll take it and then greatly enhance it so it's literally a completely different script than what the customer had. Now the newest script that was just released this past Saturday is for Microsoft DHCP. Now this requires Server 2012 or higher. I know that some people wrote some wrappers for DHCP for earlier versions of Windows, but I'm not going to go to a customer and ask them, to install unknown PowerShell stuff. So I want to use what Microsoft provides. And so this is going to require Windows 8 or higher with RSAT installed on it. And then for some reason, the most controversial thing is it requires PowerShell 3. Now I've actually gotten negative feedback from that, but I'm just like, the commandlets only come with Server 2012.
Yeah, if you need RSAT. If you need RSAT and Windows 8, you got PowerShell 3 anyway.
Yeah. So I was like, you can't get the Microsoft DHCP server module without having RSAT or running it on a Server 2012 or higher DHCP server, which is going to have PowerShell 3. So get over your griping that it requires PowerShell 3. It makes no sense. Now, for those who've never seen my scripts, all my scripts are the same. They all have the same core functionality, the same look and feel. I go off. Now, one of the biggest issues I've always had is some of the people who run some of my scripts run in extremely large environments. And we're talking thousands of servers for some of the Zenap scripts. Sure. And the script can run for days. And so I went in there a couple of versions back and added all of these write verbose statements. And in the article about it, I put, please run with -verbose. And in the README file, please run these scripts with -verbose. And probably 99% of the people don't. Then they'll email me, the script's been running for 8 days, what's it doing? Well, aren't you running with -verbose? Well, no. What version of PowerShell are you running? Oh, we're running version 2. Oh. That has that quick edit issue. If you have clicked in the window, or you clicked in it and pressed a key, the script pauses with absolutely no notification.
Right.
So I'll tell the people, click in the window and press enter. Oh, the script finished. Yeah. So that's why. So in PowerShell 3, yeah. So in PowerShell 3 and higher, I force verbose mode on, so that you will see all of this stuff. So if something hangs, I've got the date and time of the last statement, so I can actually go in the code and look. Hey, what may have happened?
Why don't you force verbose in PS2?
I have not found a way in PS2.
Oh, well, yeah, it's simple enough to at the top of your script just set verbose preference.
Okay, I never got that to work in 2. It works in 3 and 4.
Well, yeah, we'll talk offline.
Okay, all right. So anyway, as you can tell, it goes through in great detail. It's going through and showing everything that it's doing. And the reason for that is if you're running in an extremely large environment, you can tell me what's going on. I can take a look. You can send me a screenshot of whatever, and I can tell what may be causing an issue, what may be taking a long time.
Right.
Now, this has gone through and created us a Word document. Now, for this DHCP script for the customer, they had a 2012 DHCP server, but they had no Windows 8 machines, so I had no RSAT. So the only way I could create this script was in Notepad on the 2012 server. So the original script was 750 lines of PowerShell created in Notepad only. Very painful. Yeah, and so for that, because they didn't have, I was not about to ask them if I could install Word on a production DHCP server. So that script will also do formatted text. And we're doing enhancements with Jeff Wouters and with Ian Brighton. We're doing enhancements for all this Word stuff to really speed stuff up. And Ian has done some stuff where some of these tables we're creating where, say it takes a minute or more to populate a table in Word, he has optimized it to where it may populate the table in less than 1 second or a fraction of a second. So those are all going to be added. But now this script also has a formatted text option. And so if you run the same script on the same data set with the dash text option, the whole thing runs in 5 seconds. It takes longer to tell whether the DHCP server is online and available than it does to run the entire script when you're not using Word. So the next major version of all of the scripts will have optimized Word functionality and options to output into formatted text and HTML, so that people can actually then run the scripts on a server.
Cool.
And so now once the script has run, like the DHCP script, we get our standard cover page. Now in version 4 of the scripts, I added support for international languages in Word, so I support 11 languages in Word. And wouldn't you know it, German Word did not have support for the mod cover page, which was my original default, which looks a whole lot better. Actually, not mod, conservative. So I had to go to this one, which is called Sideline, and so far Sideline has been a cover page available in all languages of Word. and then it will create you a table of contents. And then also, if you save this, if you choose the PDF option, all of the table of contents, they're all clickable links. And then we start off with DHCP server information. Then we'll give you the stuff about your IPv4 properties. And then I go through and process superscopes. And then for the scopes, whether they're part of a superscope or a regular IPv4 scope, I will go through and give you all the information about that scope. And then you can optionally include leases. The customer originally asked for that, but it can really increase the amount of time the script runs. And also, the script output, this Word document, can be extremely large if you include all the lease information. And then there's the rest of the scope information. And then go through and give you multicast information. And then your server options, policies, filters. And now the other newest script that I released on Saturday is the Active Directory script. Now this script is initially based on Server 2008 R2, and so you have to have Windows 7 Service Pack 1 or higher with RSAT. And then this one right now is going to work with PowerShell 2 or higher. Version 2 of the script will require PowerShell version 3 because it will have all of Jeff's and Ian's word optimizations, right, and then the options to output the text in HTML.
Very cool.
Now this script, like I said, they all run the same. They all look the same. Now for this one here, it's a little different. At the beginning, because your command line parameters, I need to know what forest you want to document, and I need to know what domain controller you want to hit. And then if you're going to optionally specify you want hardware and/or service information on your domain controllers, you must be a domain admin to get that. So I have to test if the server you specified is online, and is it a domain controller, and is your forest valid, and if you selected either hardware and/or services, are you a domain controller in the forest that you specified? So have to do all of that checking up front, and then we go through and get all the information about the forest, all the sites and services, and all the connection objects, both the automatically and manually created stuff. And I got that information from Ashley. I know him by his Twitter name, GoTPFE. I got that from him. And then it goes through and processes all the OUs, tells you how many users, computers, and groups are in each of the OUs. And then I go through and give you group information, give you stuff on your privileged groups, give you just a listing of the group policies that are in each domain in a multi-domain forest, and also a list of group policies by OU. And then I'll give you some user information and computer information. The same Word document, our standard cover page, our table of contents, and then here in the forest information, the AD and DHCP scripts output just about everything in Word tables. It makes formatting the text a whole lot easier, and to me it makes it a little bit more readable. So on the forest level, oh, and then another thing, someone said, well, you're an AD consultant, you go around fixing AD. Isn't providing this AD documentation script, isn't that going to cut into your consulting work? And I was like, no, this is just raw data. If
this just tells you that you need to hire you.
Yeah. You can actually run this, send it to me, and I can take a look at it and see if there are issues in your environment.
Sure, yeah.
So like one of the things I want to look here are all my domain controllers, global catalog servers. Do we have any read-only domain controllers? How many domains are in the forest? How many sites do you have? And then for all the sites and services, what are all the site links, or what Microsoft calls inter-site transports? Have you changed anything? Have you changed the cost, the replication interval, the schedule? Have you enabled change notification? Is it an IP or SMTP link? And then I go and I'll list all the subnets and then all the connection objects for every server. And so if it doesn't say automatically generated, I know that you've been a bad person and you have manual connection objects, which you should not do. And probably 99.9% of the cases, you should never have manual connection objects. So I can know that that needs to be fixed. And then in the domain environment, Microsoft gives you ways to change the default computers container and the default users container. Those can be changed, but people will go out there and change things like the deleted objects container, the domain controllers container. Just because you can change something in Active Directory doesn't mean you should change it. And so someone like me can go out there and look at this and tell if they have gone out and changed things they should not have changed. I can see that they're running Exchange 2010 Service Pack 3, so I can see all the domain information. And then here in domain trusts, I list all the domain trusts. Now, the attributes field or property there, that gave me a little bit of trouble, and I needed some help from Jeremy Saunders, because on MSDN, not being a developer, I really didn't understand what I was reading on MSDN. MSDN actually said the attributes property was a single valued attribute. So I assumed that meant it could only be one, once I had the bit value, that was it. But it wasn't true, because when I was running this for the customer, I was getting all kinds of errors in here. And so Jeremy had to show me how to do the bit mask stuff where you combine different things to get the values. Now, if you don't know what you're looking at here, you may not see a potential issue. So let's go down and look at our second domain trust. All right, it's a shortcut trust to a child domain in a forest called abcd.local. Well, they've also got a trust to a forest called abcd.loc. They've also got a forest trust to a forest named abcd.net. Do you know what problem that's going to cause?
I don't, but
what's the NetBIOS name for abcd.local? ABCD. Yeah. NetBIOS name for abcd.loc, abcd.net. They all have the same default NetBIOS name. Try and migrate all of those into one forest. So, yeah, you can have the data, but if you don't know what it means, it doesn't mean anything to you. Right. And then I can go through and list all the information about domain controllers. Now, optionally, you can specify that you want to get the hardware information, or what's listed here is computer information, and you can also get service information. Now, because this is WMI, that means if you're in a globally spanning enterprise environment that, say, has hundreds of domain controllers spread across the globe, WMI is going to have to go out there and actually hit every single one of those domain controllers. So if you choose to get hardware and or services information on domain controllers, you will greatly increase the amount of time it takes to run the script, and also the amount of output you're going to get.
Cool.
Now, this right here, I learned a whole lot from this one table. This was the first table I needed to have with fixed columns, because when I did this thing as auto-fit contents, some of the OUs were easily nested, and so the last 5 columns got 1 character each. And so I had to figure out how to get the fixed width columns. And the other thing is, because for this forest here, there were around 600 OUs, which meant that this table spanned many pages. So another thing I learned how to do was how to get that first row of the table to flow across page breaks. So I learned to do that. Now, not being a developer, on MSDN, it shows some sample C# and VB script code in order to get fixed column widths, but the sample code that I found showed that you had to do it for every cell. Well, what I found out after running this script and monitoring the WinWord.exe process for this one environment here. When it finished processing the 600 OUs in this one table, WinWord.exe was consuming 800 meg of RAM. And because it's a COM object, it never releases it. No matter what you do, it's not going to release it. Well, without shutting down Word, restarting, saving, shutting down Word, restarting Word, reloading your document, going to the end, I wasn't going to mess with all that. What I found out was that for every point, and 72 points is an inch or 2.54 centimeters, every point consumed 2.5K of RAM, or of memory. And so if you had a column that needed to be 100 or even 200 points wide, if it were 100 point wide, that's, what, 2.5 meg of RAM for that one cell multiplied by 600 rows. So when we were I was working with my mentor, Michael B. Smith, in Exchange MVP, on trying to optimize this and figure out what was doing the memory. So he had me do the Word object I create is called $Word. And so he had me do Word pipe to GM dash force dash view all. And then I saw the tables property, and I said, okay, that's what I'm using to create the tables. So I wonder if I can do Word.tables pipe to GM-ViewAll-force. And when I did, I saw that there was a columns property. And not being a developer, it took me about an hour to figure out, but I figured out how to use that columns property to actually set each of the columns to a fixed width. And so instead of having to do it cell by cell, row by row, I was able to then, at the end, after the table is populated, do the number of columns equals table.columns. And it says, okay, you got 6 columns. And then I said, okay, let me do for each column in X columns. And then go through and look at the index for each column, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and say, okay, if index is 1, table.column width equals the number I needed. When I did that, no memory was consumed, and the script went from running in just under 4 hours to 1 hour and 15 minutes. And WinWord exe process only consumed 66 meg of RAM. So I learned a lot of lessons just by creating this one table here. Probably would have learned a whole lot faster if I was a developer, but okay.
You got a call on us, man.
That's why I have Jeff and Ian now.
Hey, speaking of Jeff and Ian, there's a whole bunch of questions in the sidebar.
Okay.
And several of them are from Jeff and Ian. Oh, actually, I should say I'm going to delete these questions from Jeff and Ian because most of them are not questions. They're trying to answer questions because.
Oh, okay.
Just so that everybody knows, the Google Plus Hangout thing, they have this Q&A app that we're using, but the way that it's designed is the only way to answer questions is for you and I to answer them with our voice.
Okay.
So anything that is not answered by us goes unanswered, and other people start answering it by typing in new questions with the answers, which gets very confusing.
Okay.
So anyway, somebody said GoToPFE is actually Ashley McGlone. He's a Microsoft PFE.
Yes, I have met him. He's very nice and very helpful.
And Warren asked, do you have any plans to convert the Netscaler script from the Conf parser to something that runs against the API?
That is a very Schiffer question. I can spell Netscaler. And that's about all I know about Netscaler. So Barry and a group of people from the Netherlands are the Netscaler people. And what they determined is it's easier to do it off the ns.conf file right now. in order to get the script released. Now, in the future, Barry may use the Nitro API. So that I don't know.
I have code that I hate to admit this, but I mean, as a developer that doesn't know anything about Netscaler, I hate to admit this, but I have code that calls and fetches Netscaler configuration data. I wrote it for Splunk, and it's in the Splunk Netscaler app, but it's Python. And other than that, it would be usable or reusable for stuff like this. And it's a I guess what I'm saying is it's a decent template, because what we did is we made it so you pass in what it is that you want to fetch from the configuration, and it fetches it.
Python, isn't that snake?
Yeah. Yep. It's that other language. But I work at, and you probably don't know this, but I work at Splunk. Oh, before I go off on that tangent, let me just show this. In order for those of you who are trying to answer each other's questions, we have a virtual user group that this is the presentation side of it. But we have a live chat room that goes all the time. The details are on PowerShellGroup.org/virtual/live. There's actually an embedded chat room in here where you can just log in. But there's also information about where the IRC server is, where we do most of our chatting. So if anybody wants to log into that, you are welcome. We're there all the time, not just now. But there, now I can with that I can close that and I can see myself, or you can see me here. So.
Okay.
So yeah, I work at Splunk, and
so that means you work with Brandon.
I do. I work for Brandon Shell.
My condolences. Yeah.
He probably won't watch this, but I'll be nice anyway. So. However, the key about Splunk is that it is cross-platform, and so almost everything that we write is written in Python. Splunk ships a Python interpreter, and obviously with PowerShell, it's neither cross-platform nor shippable. Meaning, even if it did run on other operating systems, we wouldn't be able to redistribute it. So. Okay. But anyway, so that's why all of our stuff is written in Python. But I did write some stuff for Netscaler, running against their REST API and fetching configuration stuff. And based on what little I did, I would be willing to bet that everything you want is in that REST API. It's just a matter of figuring out what you want.
Well, like I've told other people before, I don't know the difference between C# an API, and an SDK. I'm just a bulldog who sees a problem and just goes about trying to solve it in PowerShell.
Yeah, and actually Warren also asked, has anybody asked Citrix about PowerShell support for Netscaler?
Well, they got the Nitro API, which is supposed to be PowerShell.
I was gonna say, I thought it was Netscaler, and maybe I'm confusing Netscaler with one of the other ones that I worked on was NetApp on Tap, and they had PowerShell commandlets, but we ended up going against the REST API anyway, because and I think it was the NetApp guys. They auto-generated their PowerShell commandlets based on the REST.
That's what Citrix does.
Yeah, so maybe it is Netscaler.
Or something. OCaml, OCAML.
Yeah. Maybe it's the Netscaler one. I was thinking originally. I was thinking it was the Netscaler one. What they did is, like, in the REST API, there's paths, right, with like folder name and then a folder name and a folder name.
You got me.
And they generate. It's all URLs, right? So, okay. But they generated at the low level. They generated a commandlet for each piece of information that you could fetch from the REST endpoint.
Okay.
So, like, and I can't off the top of my head, I won't be able to think of any examples of that. But essentially, the bottom line is, if you wanted to fetch 2 pieces of information, you had to call 2 commandlets, and each commandlet had to do a round trip to the server and back.
Ooh.
But the REST API allows you to submit a giant XML document with a list of all the things that you want and get them all back at once. And you can imagine that that is many, many times faster than doing multiple queries. So their PowerShell commandlets just did not have that ability because they generated each one, code-genned it from their REST API. So anyway, but all of that to say, even when there is PowerShell support, it's not always the best thing when you want to write something like this. It's one thing to say, well, when I want to go look up one thing, then that PowerShell commandlet is nice. But they had, I can't remember, 1,000, 2,000 commandlets because of the way that they auto-generated it. Mm-hmm. And all I really wanted was, 2. I just wanted one that said, let me fetch the configuration data, and here's the list of configuration items that I want, and another that says, fetch me the performance data, and here's the list of information. We had the same problem with NetApp. Their Untitled API is like that too, where if you query it once for each item that you want, you're done. It'll never finish.
Wow.
By the time, you know what I mean? By the time you get done asking for the information, you need to ask again. And the Splunk in particular is trying to pull this kind of stuff multiple times, per minute or every 5 minutes or whatever. And so having a script that runs for a while is just not working. Anyway, so Citrix has done some PowerShell stuff, but I don't know if they've done any for Netscaler or not, because I can't remember if I'm confusing them with the NetApp one.
Yeah, someone asked for the videos saved. Yep, videos are saved, right?
Yes, the videos are saved. Let's see. You can't. Oh, I already answered this one. You can't answer questions. Only I can. Well, or you rather. So delete question. This got complicated fast. All right, so yeah, the rest of these are repeats. Yeah, you already answered this one, so I'll done that.
Okay.
Yeah, these videos are all on my YouTube stream, which should be linked from the event page somewhere. But yeah, there's my YouTube channel is where they go automatically, and whenever I schedule one, the fact that it's scheduled shows up in my YouTube channel. So if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, as far as I know, that's the only way that you can proactively subscribe to these Google Plus events. I don't know why you can't subscribe to them in Google Plus, but there you go. All right, so that answers all the questions that we have outstanding.
All right.
Jeff and Ian volunteered various pieces of information, but Jeff is saying that he's going to work with you and others to try to work around the Citrix commandlets and do .NET or SIM against Netscaler, I assume he's talking about?
No, like the Active Directory.
Oh, Active Directory, yeah, you're right.
When I go out and get the computer hardware information and services information, right now that's WMI, and because the next major update is going to require PowerShell 3, we can move those over to SIM and not use WMI.
Yeah, and PowerShell 3 is kind of very quickly becoming the baseline for server stuff.
Well, it's the baseline for the next, starting the next update of the scripts and stuff. But anyway, continuing on this script, I will also give you some group information, and then also on your privileged groups. Now, believe it or not, I had 54 people from around the world testing this Active Directory script. And it wasn't until Saturday morning when I'm sitting in my hotel room in Brussels, flipping through the slide deck, I get to this slide in the slide deck and notice that, oh, enterprise admins and schema admins, that's not correct. That's broken.
Right.
And so I came back and did some more work on it and just released this morning the fix for it. Yep, there we go. So there's the fix for it. So now I added a domain column in there, and so now all the correct enterprise admin and schema admin names are there. And then, of course, someone like me, I would want to look at this and say, why do you have a service account as a schema admin? Now, the next major update to the script, Michael B. Smith has written a function because with if your domain functional level is 2008 or higher, you can actually have fine-grained password policies. So what we want to do is go out there, and so when we're looking at, say, the user ADM we want to go out there, what password policy applies to that account? And then look at when that password is supposed to be changed, and is their last change date outside of that. So if they say they're supposed to change their passwords every 30 days, and the password last change date is greater than 30 days, it will also be flagged in red. And so
that would imply an account that hasn't been used, right?
Yeah, because like there were some of them, like down here in the schema admin, you've got the services account. The password hadn't been changed since March of 2003.
Right.
So we'll flag stuff like that. And of course, to me, I would also say, why do you even have any accounts in enterprise admin and schema admins? Those groups should always be empty until someone needs those rights. And then as soon as they have done, like added a child domain, added subnets to sites and services, or extended the schema, as soon as they have done that, you remove them from the group. So, of course, that's just my Active Directory philosophy. And then we'll go and list users and groups that have this field called, or property called admin count equals 1. That's an entirely different discussion on what that is and what it means, but it's not a good thing when you have lots of groups or users with admin count equals 1 that are not also domain admin, enterprise admin, schema admin. It's not a good thing. And then I'm just, right now in this version, I just list the group policies. For some reason, even though you have the group policy commandlets, that you can just go out there and say get GPO report -all, and give it a format, and off it goes, and it creates your report on every single group policy in your environment. People actually want that in this report. So the next major update, I'll add an appendix where I'll put in all that group policy information. So if they want it, I guess I'll add it in there because that's been asked by many people, and I'm just like, but you've already got the group policy commandlet. It's a one-line command to get a report for every group policy. And then the same thing by OU. And then, other thing, in little letters here, I just put a disclaimer. I'm not listing every single OU, because if you're in an environment with thousands or tens of thousands, I've even been in one environment that had over 250,000 OUs.
Whoa.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to list every OU when probably 95% of them aren't going to have group policies linked to them. So I just link just to the ones that have group policies. And then some miscellaneous data. I'll just give you some information on all users and active users. Of course, I'm going to want to know why 74% of your active users have expired passwords. So, and then accounts with SID history. That means you probably did a migration. You got rid of the old forest. You don't know. You may not need the SID history anymore, so this just lets you know. And then also the same thing with groups back here. I also give you, groups with SIT history so that you can catch groups and users that you have migrated if you no longer need that old forest. If you've got a large number of groups and users that have SIT history, that probably means you didn't run that Microsoft script to go out there and remove the SIT history value from the property. And then I then list all your, I know that says Windows computer operating systems. I need to change that where it just says computer operating systems, because not all of those are Windows. Because then underneath of it, I list all the non-Windows computer operating systems. And I've had one guy actually complain that, hey, this should be, the top table should be in alphabetical order by operating system. And I'm just like, no, it's by how many computers have each, you know. And he's just like, well, is it possible to have a flag and have you sort it? And I'm just like, it's a Word document. Select the table and sort by column 1. I was like, I'm not going to be, I don't want my scripts to be like RoboCopy, where you have so many command line parameters.
1,000 options, yeah.
Yeah, that you need an entire Word document just to cover what all the parameters do. All right, any questions from anyone?
Well, I think we ran through them earlier. Do you have any of the Word stuff separated out into functions that people can reuse?
We are working on that. I created a Word template, which is just a script where it's all the Word functions and parameters and stuff at the top. And then at the bottom, all the stuff to save for Word and PDF and clean up the environment. And then in between those two, you can then put your script. And so in the sample, I've got like, here's how you insert a page. Here's heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4. Let me see. I can see if I can bring that up for you. Let me kind of.
The Word stuff seems like the sort of thing that we should get all of you guys that are doing these sorts of things using a MS Word module. You know what I mean?
Yes, that's what Ian and Jeff are helping me with. So what I did is I just can you see the script?
Yep.
All right. So this is basically just telling you, hey, this is Unicode format, so don't edit this in like Notepad. You'll screw up all the foreign language characters.
Yeah.
And so it just tells you that, hey, we've got support for all these languages. Here are all your standard parameters. And then here are some examples. And then here are all the parameters. And then we go through and set all of our values for all the Word stuff we're going to use. Because most of the stuff the basic Word functionality to actually create the Word document was done by Ryan Reevord back in November of 2011. And it took me 13 months to get around to reading his email and then starting this whole chain of creating the scripts in Word. Ryan's original work created a basic Word document, but I still wanted to add a cover page, a table of contents, a footer with page numbers, and stuff like that.
Right.
And so I found a presentation from, I believe it may have been May of 2012 from Jeff Hicks that he did on, hey, here's how you can use PowerShell and Word to create a document with cover page, table of contents, footer with page number. But he used all hard-coded values, and he didn't use any error checking. There's no error checking whatsoever.
Right.
And so I've gone through, just in the last month or two, I've gone through and removed all the hard-coded values and start using all of these that I've got here. And then lots of error testing, because that was one thing Michael B. Smith was really adamant about. You need to test. Just because you call a commandlet doesn't mean the commandlet actually returned anything useful or even worked. So I've gotten in the habit of doing testing for everything. And then here's how we go through, and there were some things. What I found out was that I thought I was going to need a lot of translations for Word, but what I found out was that this right here That's almost everything I needed in Word that I thought was going to need to be translated. And I found a PDF, yeah, right here. This here's the link here, where a guy had gone out and run some VB script that he then saved it to a PDF that said, okay, in English, this is the value. In French, German, Dutch, these are the words, the actual translated words. And then I didn't see it till several weeks later, but underneath that table, he had one sentence. But you don't have to use the translated words. He said, use the constants instead.
Right.
And then you don't have to worry, this will now work for any language.
Right.
So there's only a couple of things I need. I need the table of contents, because that is language specific. Remco, whose last name I've never been able to pronounce, also from the Netherlands, a gifted developer, extremely genius. We tried to find the DLL that had the resource IDs, I guess that's the right word, for things like the table of contents and the grid table, you know, whether you're going to have lines and stuff like that in a word table. But we couldn't find that DLL that had that, so those still had to be translated. And so there's all of that, and then we go through and then create this hash table with all of the values. And then the other thing I had to have, which was the painful thing, was I had to have all of the translated cover pages. So originally I was trying to find people for each of these languages, like Catalan, Danish, Dutch, Finnish, Norwegian, Swedish, but I actually found out, yeah, Jeff, I can see it, I can't pronounce that last name. Yeah, I can't pronounce that last name. But so what I did is, and then I needed it for both, well, for all three, Word 2007, Word 2010, 2013. So what I wound up doing is just creating me 3 Windows 7 VMs on my Mac. And in one I installed Word 2007, one 2010, one 2013. I downloaded from TechNet all the language packs for all of these languages. Then what I did, installed each language pack in all 3, and then went to, because the menus always stay the same regardless of the language. And so I would click on, you know, what should be insert cover page, and then go down the list, and then right click, you know, edit, go to the properties, grab the title, go over to my script, paste. And I had to do that.
So what are you using this for?
This is the cover pages, because when I start PowerShell, they can specify a cover page. I don't.
You mean like the name of the cover page style?
Yes. Yes. And there is no commonality between, just like I said, for German Word, there's no conservative cover page.
Right.
Some of them have some and some don't. The only thing I have found common between all of them is sideline. And so that's the default cover page. And so that's the other thing I have to do. If I find out that you're using a language, well, yeah, so you see all the different cover pages. And then I do things like making sure that Word's installed. If you're running Word 2007 and you want to use PDF, you know, do you have the PDF add-on installed? Do you have a company name? When you...
I wonder if that's something where you could just ship the dot file. You know what I mean? The Word... all those Word templates are in like Word.dot or something. I wonder if you could just ship one with like a default.
No,
I don't know if it would work because
they're in 2 different files. Let me show you here. Okay, well here is where I go through, and if you have
they've got language on it, right? Like
yes.
Yeah.
Well, the 2 template files never change, so the same name in any language.
No, but I mean, when you the reason why you have to have a specific cover pages is because they actually
can select their own.
No, but I mean the actual cover page has text on it, right?
Yes. And has fields on there that are then populated.
Right.
With the date and the person who ran it and the title and all that stuff.
Right. I'm just looking at one that, so it does have a little bit of English on it, but just like the word abstract or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So hypothetically, you could ship one of these cover pages in a like a normal dot. And
yeah, but the thing I found is that a lot of people like using different cover pages.
Right. Well, that's kind of what I was getting at. Is if you shipped like a normal dot with the cover page embedded in it, then people could just modify that one file, and you could just use whatever they wanted, right?
Well, if it's Word 2007, the file was named buildingblocks.docx, and if you're 2010, 2013, it's built-in buildingblocks.docx.
Right.
And that file name is the same regardless of the language version of the operating system or Word.
Right.
But yes, we're working on all this. Matter of fact, Ian just did some optimizations today for some of the table stuff, and then also for the services stuff that I use as a sample here. And so I just go through and say, hey, here's heading 1, heading 2, 3, 4, and then here's how you do, tab stops, and here's how you do bold, italics, and change the font size, and change to a different font name. And so it just goes through and gives you 4 different tables, a horizontal table and vertical table, one with auto-fit contents and one with fixed columns, so that you can see how to do the various table stuff in there. And all of that I'm working on to where it's just something someone can get, and in between these two markers here, they can take all the stuff out between these two sections here and then start their own script. But everything above it and everything below it is consistent between all the scripts.
Right.
And then all the cleanup stuff you need for the Word object, and then also all the various ways you have to save, whether it's Word file or a PDF file, and whether if you're on 2007, you have to save a different way if you're running 2001 or 2012 or higher. And then it's because some of them you have to do it by reference, and some you have to do these enums. But if you're running 2010 or 2013, then you have to do it this way. And I found originally when Michael B. Smith had me do the set strict mode version 2, none of these save routines work in strict mode. And so I finally found how to do it through these 2 links here. And so all of these save routines and cleanup routines all work with strict mode set. So
strict mode is overrated.
Yeah. Well, it is.
You can tell him I said so.
Okay. Well, it's definitely helped.
We've just to be honest, you don't have to tell him. I've actually had that conversation.
Okay. Well,
I think unfortunately well known for my dislike of strict mode, but anyway.
Well, strict mode has helped me when I do like the Citrix policies, and there may be 600 or 700 or 800 properties.
Yeah.
And you mistype one, and then you don't find it until someone who actually has set that. So by using the set strict mode, I can find those when I run the script. So it does help me. But yes, we are working. I am working.
I always say turn it on and turn it off where it helps and where it doesn't. Because you can't.
I have it on all of them, so.
Even in your individual scripts, you can turn it on and off, and so anyway, yeah.
Okay, so that's the that's the word template you were asking about. That is coming. I am working on that with
cool.
Ian and Jeff. All right, and all right. Do you want me to keep going?
I am fine. We are starting to lose people to bed, I think.
Okay.
Those Europeans have to get up in 4 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, I know Ian had something to do at 05:30 his time, so and it's now what so he may get 5 hours of sleep.
I'm complaining because I have to get up to take my wife to the airport in the morning, and that's not till like 9. So.
Oh, okay. I mean, I've got more material. If you want me to keep going on, I can go on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
This is the part of the material that you haven't gotten to cover in other presentations, right?
That's correct. So now
do it. It'll give people a reason to come watch this one.
Yeah. So from the Active Directory and DHCP scripts, I learned a valuable lesson. I know it may be blasphemy for some, but PowerShell is not always the answer. Now, it may not be a PowerShell issue. Sometimes it's the commandlets. And you do need to know your command line utilities, or as I like to say to all those young squirts out there, thou must knowest thy command line utilities. And if PowerShell doesn't work, you need to know what you can use. So from the Active Directory script.
When thy PowerShell faileth, thy must commandeth.
Yes, that is correct. So for a project I was on, I got an email from a boss saying, hey, can you get me a list of all the members that are in this security group? I was like, oh man, it's a piece of cake with PowerShell. So I ran the command get AD-group member-identity, gave it the name of the group, and as you can see, it said it completed successfully. But it didn't. It didn't return anything. So.
And why is there red text?
Because, yeah. Because it's a.
It's my favorite, by the way. My absolute favorite is when you have a commandlet with an error message. The error message of this commandlet is the operation completed successfully.
Yeah.
It's actually, you see the fully qualified error ID.
Mm-hmm.
The operation completed successfully .microsoft.active directory.
Yeah, yeah. Well, here's what I found out.
That's awesome.
None, not a single one of the AD commandlets that go out and get users or group members or anything like that work when you have forest trust or external trust or shortcut trust. They can't handle the foreign security principle.
Wow.
Yeah, none of them. And it's a known bug. It will be fixed in the next version.
Yeah, that's what they always say.
Yes. So what did I wind up having to use? I had to use dsquery. I do dsquery, you know, the full path to the security group, and you know, redirect that into a CSV file, suck that into Excel, format it for this manager, and off it goes. And that was a piece of cake. Then the next thing they asked me to do is, hey, is it possible to take all the members from this old security group and copy them into this new security group? I was like, that's a piece of cake for PowerShell. I set. Doesn't work when you have forest trust, external trust, domain trust, or shortcut trust. Doesn't work. So what did I have to do? dsquery again. dsquery for the old group, pipe to dsmod group -add member, and let it do its thing. And so,
right.
And when I talk to the young squirts, most of them don't even know that dsquery, dsmod, dsadd, dsget, and all that. They don't even know those even exist.
Right.
The next thing, when I was doing the DHCP script, I saw that, oh, they have export and import commands. And so when I go to run it from the 2003 server, it barfs. Doesn't work on 2003. So I tested it on 2008. It works from 2008 on higher. But what I found is that for 2003, I had to use the net shell, netsh DHCP server export to the file all. And then on the 2012 DHCP server, netsh server or netsh DHCP server import the file name all.
Right.
What I found out from the 2008 R2, and 2012 servers, the NetSH is many times faster than the PowerShell import and export. And what I'm trying to remember who told me that. It was either Michael B. Smith or Remco. That is the advantage of highly optimized C++ code, which is what NetSH is. And, and the NetSH works from 2000 to 2012 R2. And so you can suck information in and out of DHCP using NetSH, and the PowerShell stuff does not always work. So you need to know your command line utilities, because PowerShell does not always work. When it doesn't work, who are you going to call? You're going to call
Connect.microsoft.com.
Yeah. All right, anyone got any questions on that? Nope.
Nope.
Okay, so I've got a few guidelines I use when I'm creating scripts. I know I'm not a developer or a programmer, don't think like that, but in doing all of these scripts, I got a couple of things. I keep it simple. My main thing is, can I read my code when I come back to it in a few months? And with all due respect, I'm not here to impress Don Jones, Jeffrey Hicks, the scripting guy, or even his wife. The only people I care to impress are the people who use my scripts. Can they read my code? Will it help them learn anything in PowerShell? And if I have done that, I've done my job. So I just like to just keep it simple and get my job done. Oh. And then one thing I've learned is to work on one thing at a time, or even fix one thing at a time. So when I'm working on my scripts, I actually do that Word template I was showing you. I actually go through and put in the top and put in the bottom, and then I go through and I look at my console and I say, okay, I got these 4 major items. I know I'm going to want each of those 4 major items on a separate page. So I'll go in there and I'll say, Word dot insert new page, write word line, for a heading 1, this is major item 1, a new page, major item 2, a new page, major item 3, and again for major item 4. Then I'll go through and say, okay, what's underneath major item 1? And then I'll go through and do, maybe like a heading 2 for each item underneath that. And so I'll do that. And so then when I run the script the very first time, I've got the entire outline of whatever product it is I'm wanting to document. Then all I've got to do is just go up to whatever is heading 2 or heading 3, and then just start filling in the blanks underneath it. And so I will work on this one section. And then when I get it done, then I'll start the next section. And I'm not sitting there trying to move all around the document, because it just gets confusing, and then I don't remember where I left off and stuff. And the same thing when I'm trying to fix a bug. If someone has reported 2 or 3 things, I'm going to fix one thing, then I'll test it. Then I'll go back and fix the second thing, do all my testing. So someone said that's like called unit testing or something. So whatever that is. And then make it work, then make it pretty. What I found that most people try to do is they try to get all the formatting, all the fonts and spacing and all this stuff without ever checking to make sure the data is correct. Make sure your data is correct and that you're actually retrieving the correct data and you have validated that the data is actually correct. Then once you have all the correct data, then we can go and make the data pretty and format it, put it in tables and give it fonts and colors and stuff like that. And the one that's so hard for me, Remco just is all over me on this one. Don't make assumptions. So now there are some things you can make an assumption about. When you create an Active Directory forest, you're going to have at least the initial forest, at least the initial domain, at least the initial default site, and at least one domain controller. So you can assume those things. What you cannot assume is that you can actually retrieve anything from the domain controller successfully. about the forest or the domain or the domain controller or any users or groups. So you have to, that was the hard thing for me. I would just do a git and say, okay, yeah, I know it's going to work, and then go on.
Right.
And then it doesn't, and then your report's all blank.
Yeah.
So then the last one, don't use hard-coded values. So that's what I have found. And Michael B. Smith also, he gripes about this. When you find, like you're trying to figure out how to do something, well, instead of me trying to spend a couple of hours or a day trying to figure out how to do something, I'm going to search, see if someone has already got that. And that's how I found Jeff Hicks' stuff on how to do a Word document, with the cover page and all that stuff. Well, what I then found out is there's no error checking. They don't check to make sure the Word object was even created. They just go on. Well,
right.
The Word object is not always created. And then when I went to do the fixed column widths for that OU table in the AD script, I had to go in there and I said, okay, all right, they're doing all this stuff with this, 0, 1. What's 0? What's 1? And what I found out is that 0 and 1 are not always the same things. And there was one where instead of 0 swap false, and 1 or not 0 is usually true. And so, but there was one of the values where -1 was true, and you had to specifically test for -1 for it to be true. And so I had to go and find all of that, and that's why in that template script I showed you, I went and created all of those values, because in PowerShell, you don't really have true constants.
Right. You can, by the way, if you use the new variable, or even set variable, but if you use the new variable commandlet, you can create variables and specify that they are constant.
Okay.
The fun thing about that is what it does essentially is if you then go and try to set their value, you get an error. It says this is a constant or read-only variable. But you can rerun the commandlet new variable and specify force, and then just wipe it out and recreate it. So it's constant, but only just mostly constant.
Okay.
It's not constant. Like in C#, if you said something is constant, you have to recompile if you want to change that thing. You know what I mean? Like you have to go back out, exit your app, and recreate the app from scratch. In PowerShell, the fact that it's constant just means you have to add some extra parameters to undo it. But it does protect you in the sense that you won't ever accidentally reuse that variable name for something else.
Okay.
And I've actually got a couple of things that I've been working on recently where I've had to go in and do that because I did accidentally reuse the variable name for something else. And if you set those as global constants or script, module level constants, read only, that does help. It's useful.
Okay.
It's one of those things like using strict mode where you don't need it, but it can make your life. It can make it harder to make mistakes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was gonna ask, do you on that you talk about doing one thing at a time? Do each of your documentation scripts, are they basically one script file with everything in line?
Yes.
So you should consider, because that would be the one thing that I would. Well, I'll back up a half a step. You remember earlier we were talking about people with negative criticism.
Yes.
And I was talking with Jeff earlier in the day. He emailed me and said, you should bring up. And I said, we should almost. This conversation with you would be a good place for me to just rant a little bit about community and constructive criticism. But I don't want to go on about it. So it's enough to sort of say most of us in the community really do appreciate getting constructive criticism. But for criticism to be constructive, it needs to be actionable. And that usually means it needs to be specific. So the constructive criticism that I would offer you would be those when you do that first draft and you put your headlines in. My vote would say what you should do is at each point after the headline, write a function call that calls a like for instance in your Active Directory, right? Get forests or get trusted domains or whatever, right? Okay. Make up a command name on the spot for that headline. Instead of writing out the headline into Word, write a command in and say get whatever that thing is, right? And that command won't exist, so the first time you run it. Now this is this is my version of test-driven development, okay? So in test-driven development, you always write the tests first. And one of the ways that you write tests first is call the method, and the program will fail because the method doesn't exist yet. So that's your first test, right? The method doesn't exist yet, because if the method does exist, then we need to pick a different name.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, when you go through, instead of writing out your headlines into Word, call a function that is going to not only get you that headline eventually when you write the function, call a function that's going to return all that data. And then you can say, okay, call this function, call this function, call this function, and your headlines are basically just function names. When you first run it, the downside of that is that when you first run it, instead of getting a nice pretty document with an outline, you're going to get a whole bunch of errors in an empty Word document, right? But then you can actually go in and fill in those individual functions, and the beauty of that is that your main script now becomes basically a series of function calls that other people, if they didn't like the order that you picked, could just easily swap the order around, right?
Okay.
And also, as a third party, as a user of your scripts, a consumer of your scripts, if I want to come in and say, what was it, that guy, I want this table sorted the other way, right?
Yeah.
Well, now I know I don't have to go in and find that in your main script. I can actually go and look in your folder, hopefully, or in your module file, but I can go and just find the function that outputs that table and tweak that function.
Okay.
And hypothetically, I could go into that function and just add a parameter, sort by or whatever, enable the ability to do the sorting, send you the, hey, look, you should just use this. And then if you don't specify the parameter, it just keeps doing what you were doing, but then I can modify my main script and add sort by name.
Yeah.
Instead of sort by count.
Okay.
And so anyway, it gives you a better it makes it easier to find the part that you want to work on if it's broken up. And I don't know, I'm of two minds about these kinds of scripts, because there isn't really any particular reason it ought to be a module, right? Because really, it is a script, and there's no reason for it to be anything but that. But sometimes it's easier if you, I don't know how big these end up being, but I suspect they end up being thousands of lines of code.
Yes.
And so it might be easier to take those individual functions, like those things that you're going to call, instead of just making them into functions, make them into separate scripts. And so then in your main script, you're just dot sourcing the script that actually does the work for each piece of the documentation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that would be the first like entry-level criticism that I would offer, just because doing that makes it, from my point of view at least, makes it so much easier to maintain going forward and for other people to get involved, because now if I want to do something like change the sorting of a table or just allow that as an option, I only have to edit this one particular script file, and I don't have to sort of read and comprehend the main portion of the content, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think the side question of that is, do these scripts exist anywhere other than as downloads from your website?
No.
Okay. Because the other option that you could do, especially, it sounds like you're already collaborating with several people. The other thing that I would do is put them on
GitHub.
Yeah.
I created an account on GitHub.
So I will say this: GitHub's cool. I started with Mercurial when Git first came out. I was playing with Mercurial instead of Git. And there's another site that's very much like GitHub called Bitbucket. It's now owned by Atlassian, which is a company you might have heard of, but they're more well-known in developer community. Anyway, the interesting thing about Bitbucket is that they allow free private repositories. And what that would mean for you is that if you've got a small group of people that wants to work on something together, but before they make it public to the rest of the world, a site like Bitbucket, or there are others. Bitbucket is simply the predominant one. There's another site. I'm trying to think what the name of it is, called Geek List. I think it's Geek List, and they've just made a Git repository hosting service.
Okay.
But anyway, point being, those two, as opposed to GitHub, will allow you to create a private repository that you can share with other people, but selectively, and then make it public when you're sort of ready for the criticism or the users to come and actually test it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
The only reason that I would suggest it is just because when I start talking about, it'd be cool if you could have said to that guy, yeah, if you want to add the ability to sort it the other way, the file you need to edit is get list computers by
OS.
OS. Yeah, right. Just go edit that file, because it generates the table and the header and everything else in there. So then if he did that, if you're on GitHub, it's easy for him to submit you a pull request. And the the promise of someday somebody sending you a pull request is the main reason why we all go to GitHub. It doesn't happen as often as I would like. But yeah, anyway, that would be the next step if you wanted to let if you wanted to get more people involved, or B, wanted to at least make it easier for people to submit fixes. That would be.
I created an account on GitHub. I have yet to figure out what to do with it.
I was going to say one thing that I would suggest. So I use a visual Git client called SourceTree.
Okay.
I won't recommend it to you because it is a I love it, but it's a kind of developer-oriented tool. The one that GitHub has, they call GitHub for Windows. It's actually an app that runs in Windows, and that thing is sufficient for the vast majority of what you would be interested in doing. And it basically has the sort of notion of like you click and say make a new project, and it makes a new project, and you copy all your files in, and then you say okay, sync, and it's like a little one-button sync where when you press sync, it checks to see if anybody else has submitted changes, pulls those down, and then pushes yours up. And it's just, you know, whereas with something like SourceTree, that operation is multiple steps because people like me want to see it happen one step at a time. With GitHub, it's just a one-click sync, and it just, you know, most of the time it just works.
Okay.
So that's the one. If you wanted to get started with that, GitHub for Windows would be the sort of entry level. Those guys, the GitHub guys, seem to have developed that with IT folks in mind. That's the Git client that I've got, like Hal and Hal and Brandon using at work.
Okay.
So, you know, anyway.
All right.
Yeah, I'm getting a thumbs up from some of the guys in the virtual user group chat saying yes, their client is nicer for us less developer-like types.
All right. You want me to continue
there's a
on?
question here that isn't actually a question from Dave. He said the C++ or C# code will usually run faster than PowerShell, and I have to say, what he says is exactly correct. Even crummy C# or C++ code will run faster because it's compiled, but that should not be used. You should not let anyone, including teams at Microsoft, use that as an excuse for why their app is so much slower than Netscaler.
Okay.
Because they're compiled, right? I mean, they're writing compiled commandlets, and if they aren't, they could be.
Yeah.
And let's face it, we can write those in C++ too. So there's no good, not a good excuse. All right, you got more?
Yeah.
Go.
All right. All right. An example of where I did a bad assumption and it bit me in the butt. So I get this guy sends me an email that he's running the latest and greatest Zenap 6.5 script, and he's getting this error, and he says, "Is this expected?" And of course, I look down and I see it say divide by 0, and so being a smartass, I want to say, of course, I always expect divide by 0 errors and never handle them. So, but anyway, so I'm going down and I'm looking at this, and I see max length of server name is 63. I'm focusing in on that, ignoring all the stuff above it. And so I'm just like, how do you get a server name of 63 characters? So at this point, I'm completely missing that we're doing worker group by OUs. So it's actually an OU name, not a server name. I don't see that yet. All I see is server name is 63, attempt to divide by 0. So I go off on a wild goose chase, trying to figure out how the heck you can get a server name of 63 characters. So I'm seeing here, we got a max length server name 52, max length server name 63. Well, obviously 52 wasn't an issue, but 63 was. So I go and look at the code, and I go, oh, 60 divided by max length. What's 60? I was like, crap, what was 60? I can't remember. I don't remember why I decided to use 60.
Right.
And so now we're saying that, all right, we know the max length was 63, so the integer result of 60 divided by 63 is 0. And we're going to come down here and attempt to divide by our 0.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did to fix it, obviously removed the hard-coded value of 60, and then I set a max table width because a server name, NetBIOS server name is maximum of 15. This table is indented, so I can actually fit 4 15-character server names in that table without anything wrapping. So 4 times 15, that's where I got the 60. So I now go over there and say, hey, so I'm now looking, hey, does my array count, is it less than the number of columns? All right, are columns equal 0? All right, columns are equal 0. Here's how we're going to handle this. We only have one item, so we're going to have one column with one cell, and array count is 1. So everything is now 1. We're going to have a one cell table. And then everything else is handled the way it was originally handled. And then, to keep me from going off on a wild goose chase, I added another parameter to my function called type to let me know the type can either be server, security group, or OU. And then that way the message will actually say, the max length of an OU name is 63. And so, I mean, I spent probably 6 hours on a wild goose chase, because I didn't ever figure I would have it divided by 0 and had the hard-coded value, and I didn't have a message in there that actually represented what that function was actually handling at the time. So that
divide by 0 things will get you every time.
Yeah. Yeah, that was 6 hours of my life I'll never get back. All right, want to keep going on?
Go for it.
Okay. When I released the original Dacp 6 and 6.5 scripts way back at the end of September, beginning of October 2011, I immediately started getting requests for Dacp 6 and 6.5. You can have policies. The policies can be what they're called farm-based policies or IMA-based policies, meaning they're kept in the SQL database that's being used by the Dacp farm, or you can also choose to use Active Directory-based policies. So I got a lot of requests, when are you going to handle AD-based policies? And I was like, I can't figure it out. So I actually found the blog entry on Citrix from the guy who actually released the module to handle Citrix AD-based or Citrix policies. And it's easy to figure out someone at Citrix's email address. So I sent him an email saying, how do you handle this? And he says, I don't know. I was like, but you wrote the code. Yeah, but I don't know how to do it. So about a year or so later, I came back to him and said, man, I'm getting a lot of requests for this. Is there any way to figure out how to do this? And he came back about 3 days later. He went to Citrix Engineering and had them find out and give me some information. And so, here is where I have created a Dacp Active Directory-based policy. And now, in order to figure this out, I had to get my friend Jeremy Moskowitz help. So he could help me figure out what this file was, what's in the file, and all this stuff. So Jeremy actually spent about a day with me trying to figure all this stuff out. So here's the stuff, and we get our GUID for the policy. And then what we found out was that it actually creates a file called policies.gpf that's in Windows, sysvol, domain, policies, then that GUID that was just on the previous screen, machine, Citrix, group policy. If you go all the way down to group policy, you'll see that you now have a file called policies.gpf. That's how we know a policy is Active Directory based for Citrix and not farm based. So then what you can do is then you take that policies.gpf, copy it to a file named policies.cap, and then you can now extract policies.cab. You can see that it's actually a zip file within a zip file. Is what it actually is. and then I'm going to open it up with WordPad, and you'll see it's actually Full Armor actually did this for Citrix. And I believe Full Armor is also the same people that did the group policy preferences, I think. So anyway, at Synergy, I was talking to a Citrix employee about this, and he said, that's non-disclosure information. And I was like, I found this out myself with Jeremy Moskowitz's help. I didn't get this through any, NDA information. I said, I figured this out. So, no. So to me, this is not NDA. I figured it out. So actually, Jeremy helped me figure it out. So now, what we did, Michael B. Smith wrote me a little function, and I've stripped out this to be as base as it can. Because wouldn't you know, as soon as I release this script with the ability to report on Active Directory-based policies, I got people saying, hey, I'm getting an error when I run this because we're running in a work group. We don't have a domain. I was just like, wow, people actually use XenApp in a work group mode? And obviously they do. So what I do is go out there and get the root, and if root comes back, you don't see the error testing here, but if root comes back, that it's, exclamation point, $, question mark, or root is null, then I know I'm in a work group and I don't need to run this function. Otherwise, we're going to go down and get the domain naming context, then we get the domain information, and then we create an array to get all the files we're going to find in sysvol, and then we go down and look in sysvol trying to find these folders, and then I do it again because what I found out is if someone has a very large sysvol, like say they've got hundreds or thousands of group policies, the initial call times out and the array is still empty. And so I then run it again, and I guess it picks up where it left off because it continues on and then returns everything that it found in sysvol. And then we go through this little loop here, and we're looking for the file that has a full name like Citrix Group Policy policies.gpf. If we find that, we're going to split that by the backslash, and then if the array length is greater than 7, and why 7? Because like I was just saying, we don't hard code values, but 7 is meaning that we now have the 3 folders necessary for this to be a Citrix policy. If it's not a Citrix policy, the array length is only going to be 6. And then our array element number 6 is the actual GUID for the policy. And so if the array length is greater than 7, we know it's a Citrix policy. Now we're going to go to array element number 6, convert that to a string, do an LDAP lookup, and get the actual display name for that group policy, and then create an array. Now, when I tested this, as usual, one thing I've never understood about PowerShell is if I have a call to a commandlet and it returns multiple objects, it works. But if it returns just one, it doesn't work because it has returned a singleton.
Right.
And it's not an object. It's an array.
That's fixed in 3 or 4.
Okay. That's very.
I don't know. I don't see what you're doing with that, but yes. Oh, the dot length.
No, I'm now going to do this return comma $X array.
Oh, yeah,
so that it wraps or unwraps what it returns, so that it actually returns it as an array or something.
Right.
So anyway, I had to have a comma in there before the return value. So if there was just one element in the array, it returned properly.
as an
If
array.
I don't have that comma there, it doesn't work if it only finds one group policy.
Right, it'll just return a policy instead of an array of policies.
Right, right.
So it's your caller that is going to get messed up in that case.
Right, right. And so I had to handle that also.
Now, why? I mean, I don't want. Never mind. I was going to go down a rabbit hole.
Oh, okay.
Isn't it enough to see the Citrix group policy, and you don't need to? Why do you need to check the length in addition to that?
Because I need that display name, because I'm going to create a PowerShell drive based on that display name. The length means I have customers who have thousands of group policies, and they may have one Citrix 80-based policy.
Right.
I only need to look at the one policy that's in the one sysvol folder that has that Citrix group policy folder structure underneath there. It just speeds it up. I don't have to process thousands of group policies looking for the one.
Right. No, I'm just asking. Like you do if file full name is like Citrix group policy, blah blah blah, and then you check to make sure that there are 7 elements in the array. That's the bit that I was confused by.
Oh, okay. Someone just said.
But I see that you're doing it because you're going to pull the 6th element out, so you just want to make sure that you did it right.
Right. And so then once I get that, I then have the policy name, the Active Directory policy name, and then I can then create the group policy command module. Then has a thing that allows me to go and actually then create a PowerShell drive based on the name of that policy, the display name, because that Active Directory policy has absolutely nothing to do with the Citrix policies inside of it.
Right.
I just have to create a drive for that Active Directory policy. Once I have that drive, I can then process all the Citrix policies that are in there, because an Active Directory policy can contain one or more Citrix policies inside of it. So yeah, it's very confusing. It took me a while to actually work all of this out, but once I did, I've actually taken that one line, the LDAP line, and I use that in the Active Directory script. So instead of having to call the group policy module in order to get the group policy names for the policies linked to the domain and the OUs, I just use that because all I'm needing are the names. Plus also the group policy. This works with the brackets or the braces on the for the GUID.
Right.
Group policy module. If you say get GPO name and you pass it the GUID, it doesn't want the braces. You got to strip the braces. So this was just easier for me, and I didn't have to worry about having the group policy module. All right. And this one guy says if you want to maintain PowerShell 2.0 compatibility, you need that comma.
Yeah, he's saying if you have an array in PowerShell 3, you can do rate output no enumerate.
Okay.
Because it's an array, when you do rate output with an array, by default, the array is output, but if you are able to, it outputs the individual objects from it. So if you only have one, then it just outputs that object. I'm not sure if no enumerate will fix the. I'd have to look at how you were calling it to be sure that that is actually fixed. But anyway, the fact is, what the normal way that I fix things like that is when I call the function, I put the @ sign in parentheses around it, so it forces it to return an array when I'm at the point where I'm calling it from, instead of at the point where I'm designing the function. But
okay.
But that's, I mean, obviously that is.
I didn't know you could do that. Okay, I'll test that.
Yeah, if you call a function like for instance, when you do get child item, right? Like dir, it can return one file, or it might return a lot of files. If you want to make sure that you always get an array back, you just put an @ sign and open parentheses dir, close parentheses. And then whatever you get back, whether it's one item or no items, or 100 items, you're going to get an array back. And it might be an array with nothing in it, but it'll be an array.
So would array count or array length then be 0?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Although PowerShell 2 had some weirdness about length.
Yes, it did.
So sometimes you would get length 0 or length 1, but when you checked, the only thing in it was a null. That was always frustrating. With 3 and 4, they actually made it so that whenever you call a command like that, they did. Well, I call it dark magic because it's not. They didn't really do this, but they made it so that it works if you call it as though they had. But essentially, every time you call a commandlet and assign the value to a variable, that variable you can call .length on it, and you can even use the indexer and do square bracket 0. So if you do .length and it says 1, you can access square bracket 0, and if it only returned one object, so you say you did files equals dir, and it only returned one file, you can do files.length. It's gonna well, actually, that's an interesting one because files have a length, but in theory, it's supposed to say 1. And when you ask it to files square bracket 0, it's not really an array, but it'll still return itself as the value of square bracket 0.
Okay.
Anyway, but that doesn't help until you move to the I require PowerShell 3, right?
Okay.
Because before that, you need most of the code that I write. I'm still trying to keep PowerShell 2 compatibility. I don't always bother testing it, but I try to write it that way anyway.
Okay. We're as of the script update I started working on today, they require PowerShell 3.
Right.
So yeah, this would be an interesting thing to look into because this has always driven me crazy. I got all this stuff in my script, that hey, if that $? Was successful, then is it an array? If it is, then I do this. Then I have this many items. Else I have this many items. If it's not an array, then okay, I've only got one of something. So it's for this non-developer. I never understood why if I say get 80 domain and it returns 2, I've got an object. But if it returns just 1, I don't have an object. And I don't, that to me doesn't make sense.
Well, you have an object, you just don't have an array of objects.
Right.
But the reason, the simple reason for that is, as a general rule, PowerShell doesn't ever actually return an array of objects. What Dave said is the reason why you would put no enumerate is if you actually have like an array of strings, and you use the no enumerate, the output will be an array of strings instead of an array of objects. Because what really happens in PowerShell commands is there's not just a single return point. With other languages that are not shell languages, you have a function, and when you say return, that's the only place that anything can come out of the function, right? Okay. And then the function is done because you said return. We return something, and we're done. In PowerShell, we have the notion of write output, right?
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about? So
yes.
All you have to do is you can say return. That's kind of like saying write output and then exit. But if you say write output, or even just write the name of a variable with nothing else on the line, it outputs that. So the cool thing about PowerShell is you can output inside a loop, for instance. So that's what, like a process block, when you do a pipeline, you output lots of things. So anyway, point being, because with PowerShell you can output from many places, you might output only one thing, but you might output another thing later, right? So when you assign into a variable, PowerShell actually stashes the assignment in an array list. And when you're done outputting stuff, they check to see if there's more than one thing. And if there is, they output the array list as an object array. And if there isn't, then they just output the one thing that you output. And the reason is because they didn't want to just arbitrarily wrap everything in an array, because that would be kind of annoying. You'd be writing extra code all the time to deal with just unrolling empty arrays or arrays of one thing, right?
Okay.
But ultimately, the point is that when that first thing comes out, there's no way to know whether something more is coming or not. And that's the fundamental problem that you have. So putting a comma in front of it is PowerShell's way of saying this is an array. So when you have an object like a string array or a list or any of these .NET enumerable things, they won't unroll it and output the single object. They'll just output an array with that one thing inside of it. So you keep your type. And in your case, you've got an array already in your function. You've got an array. So when you put the comma in front, it keeps it as an array and outputs it instead of just outputting each thing.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's like I said, I normally deal with it on the outside of the function instead of on the inside, only because there are so many. It's the pattern that Microsoft has set, right? Like when you get child item, sometimes it returns an array, sometimes it doesn't. In your case, you've got a similar function where sometimes it returns one item, sometimes it returns many, but you always return an array. That's a little bit weird from a PowerShell point of view, just because that's, the standard for PowerShell is to return one if there's one. So I always deal with it on the outside just so that my functions behave the way Microsoft's do, I guess is really the answer.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of times I do stuff like that and I go, there's not really a good reason why I'm returning one item instead of an array of one item, except that that's the way Microsoft does it, so people who use PowerShell expect it to be that way.
Okay.
But you do, it does mean that every time you call this yourself in your code, you have to end up wrapping it in parentheses because you want to treat it as an array just in case it is one.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
I've still got more.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay. As I said, it's almost 2 hours, so I didn't know.
Yeah, we're just about at the 2-hour mark.
Okay.
Got a few more minutes.
All right. Okay. Zen Desktop 7.x license inventory. This is the one that really puzzled me. Because in the Zen Desktop console, you've got all of this license information, and I couldn't find any way to get it. So I did add ps snap in *history and then git command list imported, sort module name unique, and so I could see all the stuff that Citrix had installed there. And then I see there's a citrix.licensing.admin.v1 module. And I was like, sweet.
I had to say that's an interesting thing there where you imported one and they imported, every command is in a different module name.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Are there thousands of commands and not just one, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they've created something like 15 different modules inside their snap-in.
And as I found out, the licensing admin one, not documented for 7.5 or 7.1 or 7. Not documented. So I said, okay, git command module citrix.licensing.admin.v1. What's out there? And so I see all of this stuff and I go, oh, there's a git license inventory. Perfect. Exactly what I want. So I run it. It says, hey, I need the admin address. Well, for all of Zen Desktop 5 and 7, admin address is always the name of your controller. And so I enter the name of my controller. And it says, sorry, communications error, invalid operation. I was like, okay. So I said, okay, let me get help. And it says, okay, oh, it wants my license server information. Okay, well, let's rerun it again using my license server. Oh. Now I got a certificate verification code.
Which is why they haven't documented it, because they know that it never works.
And so then I go off on this wild goose chase of, okay, what do I have with certificates and stuff like this? And as a CTP, we get free certificates from DigiCert.
Right.
So I get on DigiCert site at like 10:30 at night.
Real cert.
And I get a cert, and same issue. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Even with a real cert on it, it still doesn't work?
No. But there's a reason for it. Now, at this point, what I have done is I have cheated. When Zen Desktop 7.1 was released, like 2 days later, they re-released the ISO. Well, what I found is on the original ISO that they released that I had, they had all the source code for all the modules on the ISO. So I went snooping around and found the source code.
Cool.
Poorly documented. No comments, whatever. And so that's kind of how I figured out some of this stuff. So anyway, I see that, okay, it's wanting my license server information. Well, where do I get that? Oh, okay, well, I know I can get that from get-broker site. That's going to give me my license server name and the port and stuff like that. So I assign that into a variable XD site. Then I know I have to go get my license location with the parameter of my license server address for the license server name I just got from the previous commandlet, which then tells me that, oh, here's the address you need to enter. Of course, the 8083 wasn't in the previous thing, so I don't know where it's getting the 8083, but it says, okay, that's what you need to enter.
That's on your previous slide, isn't it?
No, there's no 8083.
Oh, the port is 27,000.
Yeah, that's the standard license server port.
Right, okay.
So now I'm saying, oh,
magic.
8083 on there. That's the web server port.
Right.
And so I said, okay, well, now let me pass that into get license certificate with the admin address of the license LS admin address from the previous slide. And then I send that to a formatted list so you can actually see it.
Right.
And there's a cert hash. That's the magic. It didn't want anything about the certificate or the name or anything. It wants the cert hash. So now I found that just by looking in the source code. Someone who didn't have the source code would not have done this. So now that I have the cert hash, now I can go and say get license inventory with the admin address that I got from 2 slides ago with the cert hash that I just got from the previous slide.
So they actually validate the cert against, you have to provide the cert hash.
Yes.
But it's not marked as mandatory on the command.
Nope.
That's beautiful.
6 hours to figure this out.
I can imagine. Yeah, that's pretty awful.
With no documentation, there's no comments.
I'm impressed you persisted.
That's why I said I may not be a developer, but I'm a bulldog. Yeah, I'm gonna figure this stuff out. That may have taken me 30 minutes.
I have to say it's nice. This is what we've been asking for this on the something like that on the Invoke Web and Invoke REST stuff that Microsoft puts out. Please let us say, here's a valid cert hash or something like that, so that when we have a self-signed cert, it obviously won't validate. Right now, if you use Invoke Web Request, against a web server that has a self-signed cert. Like, for instance, by the way, a default Splunk install, because we just generate a self-signed cert on your box when you do the install. So if you try to hit the HTTPS endpoint, which is required for the REST API for Splunk, the cert is self-signed. It's invalid. But your browser will just give you a warning, and you click yeah, and you'll move on.
Yeah.
Well, PowerShell commandlets just fail, and you just can't call that REST API with the PowerShell REST commandlets at all, unless you do some crazy hacks to just disable cert validation in .NET. But this is exactly what we want. However, the fact that you have to provide it is kind of broken. That's crazy.
Yeah. So now that I have my product license information, I wrote just a little script to go through and get some information, and then I'm going to make sure, is this the same information that's on this screen? And yes, it is. So now that I have made it work, now I can make it pretty, which is my guideline number 3.
Cool.
And all of this matches exactly what I get from the Git broker site. All this information up on the top half, and then on the bottom half matches all the convoluted stuff I had to go through to get the license inventory. Now on Zendesk 5.6, all you have to do, well, and there's the licensing burn-in date. Now for Zendesk 5.6, you basically have most of the same stuff. There's my get license config.admin.v1 instead of citrix.licensing.admin.v1. And then there's all my commandlets I can do. And there's my get license inventory. I run get license inventory, boom, it works. But completely different in version 7. You got to run a sequence of 4 commands to get this.
Right.
None of which are documented.
Cool. So which version is it that works?
The version 5 just works right off.
So the old one.
Yeah. Yep.
Good progress. All right.
And then I've got showing you how I added international support for all of these languages. Now, for each of these, each of them have different language codes. Like, who knew there were 20 different versions of English? And that's not counting Southern and stuff like that. French has 13, and so you add all of these up, and there are 69.
You should give those Southern people their own language code.
I know it. That's right. We should have our own.
If they say y'all, it's US.N or NUS-S.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So Microsoft's recommendation, is to have a PSD1 file for each one of those language codes, which means I would have to have 69 PSD1 files.
Yep. Although you can have just top-level ones, but...
So what Michael recommended is just going off the first 3 characters of the language code.
Yeah,
so
can't you... now, I've said that now, but maybe I should test that. I think that you could create a DE language folder and just load DE. Instead of needing DE-DE, I think you can do just DE.
Well, all their examples in their documentation have language-region.
Right.
All the examples. So
because if you want to do localization right, you probably should have every language code. But I'm 90% sure that you can do just the first DE. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. What you did works.
Yeah, because basically what we do is we just do the first 3 characters.
Right.
And then we fill in all the rest of the information. And by default, if they're using something else, we're just going to default to English, U.S. English. And that's what we did. That's how simple it was to add the internationalization support for all these scripts. So the scripts will support 11, 12 different versions of Microsoft Word.
And you have do you have translated headers and stuff for each of those languages?
No, because the headings and stuff, I just use the numeric value.
No, but I mean like your actual output has headers.
No, all the output is in English because Citrix, even though they'll support French and German and Chinese and stuff, all the console stuff, English.
Right.
And all the date and time is American, U.S.
So basically, you just need to support the different languages of words so that it works in.
Right. So they get a cover page and the table of contents and the actual grid table.
But it's not the output's not localized. No. It's just the actual working against weird versions of Word. Gotcha.
Right. Because Citrix doesn't support it. So.
Yeah. So in that case, what you did is absolutely better. Because I wouldn't mess with localized PSD1 files if you're not putting resource strings, actual text in there for people to translate. It's not worth it.
Yep.
Well.
Yeah, I got this one left. I think this is the last one. Now, this is a script that should not have been needed. PVD, if you're in the Citrix world, it's got a very bad reputation for some good reasons. The PVD is split into two halves, the application and the profile. Now, in Windows, what happens if your C drive starts to fill up? You'll get a little balloon pop up that says, hey, you get low on space. You don't get that with PVD, neither from the admin level or the user level. When it fills up, it craters. And then you have to do a PVD reset. Oh, okay. And so when you do a PVC reset, the user just lost all their user-installed applications. And this was happening on a project where they had like 400 offshore developers, and their PVDs kept filling up, and they had to do a reset. Well, it was taking these developers 10 hours to reinstall all their, Visual Studio stuff and all their toolkits, and
Right.
It was horrible. So Citrix wasn't thinking when they did that.
Yeah, that's.
Now Citrix does supply this personal VDIS pull stat script you can run, and you'll get this nice little thing here. Unless you're like the vast majority of males and you're colorblind to green and red. And then if you've got hundreds or thousands of desktops, this thing's just going to scroll and scroll and scroll.
The natives
so what you can do is you can just copy all of this, put it in an email or a Word document, for your boss, and then you're going to lose all the colors.
Right.
And so what I did is I created a script that actually does 3 times as much work, but runs 3 times faster, because what I found on this is that if I create the CSV file first, save it, and then import it into Excel, populate the data into Excel, delete the CSV file, that this runs much faster than trying to populate Excel by itself.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And then I get this nice little
CSV is the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wish I could do that in Word, and that's what Ian is working on for an optimization, is a faster way to populate the tables. And then we'll also get this summary sheet here, and then what we can do then is send an email to each of these users that lets them know, that their personal VDIS space, has reached over 90%.
Right. That's cool. That's a helpful.
Wrong space. Alrighty, that's about all I got for you.
All right, here, let me check this. I'll show you something.
Okay.
Actually, here, I'll share one screen, I think. I'm only doing this because Dave Wyatt's trying to beat me to it.
Okay. Yeah, he says it should work.
So here's the if you can see, let's see. Okay, see values.psd1.
Uh-huh.
So that just has 1 and 2 equals 1 and 2.
Uh-huh.
And then if you look in LSN, or actually cap, that one has the actual English values. Yeah?
Okay. All right.
So if I do import localized data, base directory, where I am now, file name is values, what you'll get is the English, because it actually interpreted EN and returned the English values.
Yeah. Okay.
So if I were to actually just like copy that, let's see, how do I do that? Mictor ES and whoops. Do like 1 equals 1, 2 equals 2, ES values.psd1, and then if we do what's the UI culture ES, what's the non-generic MX? Is that a valid one? There you go. Yeah. So even though I said Mexican Spanish, it just pulled off the ES and looked it up.
Okay. Cool.
So that does work. Now again, that's kind of, this is what you do when you're trying to actually localize a script. You have your base, like English one, for instance, and you ship it, and then other people can translate this for you, right? They can just give you a PSD1 file with their language strings in it. Really simple to have other people do that, because it's just a text file with a whole bunch of text in it, right? Okay. And in fact, what you would normally do, obviously I'm just doing numbers, what you would normally do is you'd have the English on the left and the translation on the right, so that when they're translating it, they can reference, it's clearer what's going on in the string. But the point is to have something on the left and something on the right, and then when you import the localized data, you can do like, strings equals, and when you need a string, you can do strings and the name of the string, whatever it is. Well, actually, strings. Oh, it's a number, isn't it? Because I didn't put strings in, but you can get that way. You can always reference the actual translated strings based on, and if you don't provide the UI culture, then you just get whatever the culture of the people that are running the script is. Okay. And you can always, the deal is that you always get the fallback, right? So if you don't have it in their language, they just get English. But if they want to translate it themselves, they can just provide it.
Okay.
Anyway. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Really cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
By the way, if anybody is still interested in more PowerShell for the evening, the Power Scripting podcast is probably just about to kick off. They record live on Thursday nights. About this time. They start like 9:30. Anyway. Okay, and I'll send out, I will make sure that everybody who said that they would be here and isn't actually here will get an invite for next month after I firm up who's actually doing the speaking. All right, and if you I'll post, Carl, I'll post a tomorrow morning. I'll wait until then. I'll post links to the recordings on all, my Twitter, Facebook kind of feeds.
Okay.
If you want to, you can do that separately, or you can just wait until I post mine and you can retweet.
Okay.
I say that only because that way you don't have to look up what the actual URL to the YouTube page is.
Okay.
But actually, they should be able to access the recordings at the same URL that we used for the Hangout.
Okay.
So the one that we've been tweeting,
Uh-huh.
that URL is still valid, but now it leads to a recording of the show.
Okay. Sweet.
Cool. Dave says the podcast is on Wednesdays this week, so never mind.
Oh, okay.
Whatever.
All right. Well, I hope having a non-dev type person.
Yeah, I know it's cool. I mean,
I
had Jeff Wouters come on earlier, and it was a similar kind of presentation, and it was very well received. So I can't have all devs, because let's face it, most of the people that want to do or want to learn more about PowerShell are not devs.
Yeah.
When I start speaking dev speak, people glaze over and fall asleep. So it's good. All right, thank you, and good night.
All right, good night.